I'm Carlos Camacho. I'm a psychologist, and I've done this before, and I've done it live at Fairfield Library, which is wonderful. But due to the situation that we've had in Australia and the world, we've been doing a lot of these Zoom meetings and other digital type meetings. So you can see there a bit of the structure of what we're going to talk about. 60 minutes isn't much, so I'm not going to spend too much time on my introduction. As you know, some of you, I work in a clinical setting. I see a lot of people with depression, and I found that some things are better than others in order to treat it and to identify what are the signs. Because in psychology, the biggest part of our treatment is actually being able to diagnose something, to identify. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can all do that for oneself, but also for others, which is very, very important, because once we know, then we can do something about it. Like the great Plato, the philosopher from ancient Greece, said, knowledge is power, my friend. So it's still a goodie, and although it's quite old. So knowledge is very important. That's why today we're going to break it down into some very, very basic type of scenarios. I just want to quickly define depression, because a lot of people talk about it, but not everyone knows exactly what it means. It's important to differentiate depression from sadness. We all feel sad. That's a given. It's part of life. There's two things that make up life. It's like two ingredients. And one is happiness, the other one is sadness. You can't escape it. Nobody can, regardless of gender, class, money, wisdom, whatever it may be, culture. There's always a time that we're going to feel sad, but it's not necessarily depression. When we talk about clinical depression, we look at the intensity, we look at the time frame, how long it lasts, and we also look at how deep the person can get into depression, but also how quick they can come out of it. So a lot of us do feel depressed, and there's times in life where we will. Things happen in our life, and of course there's going to be issues that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Usually those things we recover from, and we tend to be able to continue our life as per normal. People that suffer from depression find it very difficult. Things may be fantastic, but yet there's something not allowing them to be happy, and therefore a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counsellor, a social worker may look at the symptoms of depression, and there's many ways of treating it which we'll go into. So that's a slight difference. Yes, we all get sad. Not all of us suffer from depression, though. So this is really about the more clinical part of depression. And of course, a lot of us have actually suffered from depression, and maybe just a one-off. Maybe it lasted a day, maybe it lasted a week, maybe a little bit longer. Maybe it came in and went over a period of time when things weren't that well, or maybe we just were unsettled. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're born with depression. We definitely have a disposition to have depression. In psychology, we call it disposition, yeah? It's a little bit of the chance of having something, the potential, if you like, of having something. But depending on situations, it may or may not develop. So, and just like negative things like depression, there's also positive things that may not develop. We all might have the potential to be a great writer or a netballer or a politician, which we need good ones now. And we find that maybe we didn't take our chances, or maybe we didn't have the opportunities to develop that. So in life, there are potentials. We call them dispositions in biology and psychology. So yes, some people are more prone, if you like, to depression. So that's the little definition I like to start off with. There will be time for questions at the end, as you probably read on the structure of today. So I will endeavour to answer all your questions. If I don't know it, I'll invent something on the spot, as we usually do in psychology. Or if not, I'll refer you to some articles or somewhere else you can actually discover some further information. But the beauty of psychology and all humanities is that it's still open for discussion. I don't have a blueprint for depression or any type of human behavior or condition, and therefore I'm just going to stick to the facts, and we are all capable of interpreting different ways, and that's the beauty of art and all the humanities, that we all have our subjective input. So this is a little bit of a framework with regards to facts, but we can't get away from my own subjectivity. So you may speak to another psychologist and they may have a different point of view, but I stick to pretty much what I find that works, and some practical advice that you can all take with you today. So, all right, so we need to identify first, and that's one of the things that us psychologists and psychiatrists find it quite difficult. Sometimes it takes time to identify certain aspects of someone. And of course, looking at identifying symptoms of depression can be quite tricky because of what we just said. People feel sad, and life is made up by sadness and happiness, a combination of both, if you like, suffering, yeah, and triumphs, I suppose. There's always those opposites in life that we're all prone to, regardless, as we said, who we are. So we just got to be careful not to jump to conclusion. But it's better to err in the side, I suppose, of being a little bit conservative, because if you find, especially if you see that one of your sons, your daughters, whether they're teenagers, children, your father, your mother, has changed in the last little while or are behaving a little bit different, maybe it's a good opportunity to use these skills and recommend certain things rather than leaving it too long. It's always best to intervene as quickly as possible. We know that in medicine, without a doubt, it's always best. So it's no different with depression. Identifying, okay, one of the big things that comes across, let's talk about other people first and then we'll talk about ourselves, which is much harder, of course, when we try to analyze ourselves, because we're living inside our own body and some of the things we do come natural, and so they don't seem out of place. But when someone else approaches us, especially when we know them well and they are behaving or talking differently, doing things differently, then that does stand out. So it's a good place to start, I find, with others. And as a psychologist, yeah, I have the opportunity to practice this pretty much every day. So it becomes natural. And we're all psychologists in a way. We all have the ability to analyze others, and we've all done it. I'm sure all of you out there have met someone and immediately have come to the conclusion that they may be like this, they may not be like that, or they might not be the right person to hang around with, or the contrary, they might be lovely and we know we're going to be friends forever. You know, we've all had those experiences in life. So in a way, we're all in tune. We are less so today in the modern world because of other more complex situations we won't go into today. But a lot of us have untuned ourselves from that initial intuition. It's important to tune ourselves back into it, because intuition is always right, my friends, most of the time anyway, and it's always good to have that radar in order to know where we're standing and whether we're going to spend time with others or not. With regards to people we know their type of behaviour. People change throughout time, but usually when there's a drastic change, one is, of course, the time that they want to spend with others. If people you find are isolating themselves, they will be withdrawn, we say in psychology, which pretty much means that they like spending time on their own. That's already something to think about. They may be an introverted person, so it might be more difficult for us to pick up on, but usually there's a certain type of withdrawal, because that linked to something else, which is they stop doing things they actually liked. So it's not so much wanting to be on their own because they're introverted and they like their own company, but it's also them ceasing from doing activities that were once of great value to them. And so that's a very important one too. When we see that the people that we know decide to avoid those situations, then that's another one. So there's two there. And so that's immediate because that relates to us and their social environment as well. Another thing is, which is important when they do talk to us, to study their mood, whether they look a little bit flat, but also anger can be a big sign and a significant symptom of depression, because people that are depressed are not always just down and flat. They sometimes react quite violently, not in the physical sense, but towards their environment, because they don't want to be there, they don't want to do things, they don't want to talk, they don't want to be involved. So the way they are communicating, if it's a little bit more serious, a bit rougher, so to speak, towards us and towards others, that's always a significant sign for us to keep in mind. There's that's a little bit of a social thing that we can look at. Also, we can study as well some of the words that people use. People that suffer from depression become a little bit more negative, of course. There is negativity, there's pessimism, and there's depression, and they're all related, of course, but some people are very, very happy people, and they're quite negative and pessimistic, because they would say they're realists, but they're not depressed. They would say they love life and so forth, but they feel that life is a certain way, or they have no real optimism for the human race and so forth. That might just be a philosophy of life. So that's quite different. But when someone is always negative, pessimistic of their own chances of success and so forth, that's always a good sign that they might be depressed. It's also a sign of their self-esteem, of course, which is correlated with depression. So negative terms, always look out for that. That's very, very important. Negative terms that people use. Yes, I think another one which is quite convenient for us who are parents or grandparents, if our kids, if the young people are sleeping too long, that's also an important sign. Not wanting to get out of bed, preferring to stay in bed, staying up late usually, and getting up late in the morning. Getting up late in the morning is a very significant sign of depression, actually, for anyone. So that's, if you know anyone that just gets up late and has told you, look, I've tried to get up early and I can't, they might not even know they're depressed, but they just want to stay in bed. The less that they're awake and facing the world, the better, in a way. They don't know that, of course. That's an unconscious reaction. So getting up late is very, very significant. Also, the lack of exercise, them avoiding situations where they have to use up energy. It could be going dancing, it could be going to a place where they need to invest a bit of physical energy. Their diet changes sometimes as well. Yeah, we have to make sure that it's not on purpose, that they're not eating certain things, or that they're not eating well. A good sign, actually, of someone that's healthy is that they have a well-structured diet. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to lose weight. They just eat at certain times, they eat certain things, they don't eat certain things on a regular basis. The odd time, of course, we all have to end up eating something we don't want because something's, or most of the things that may not be open, so we end up going into fast food places and so forth. That's okay every now and then, I suppose. The increase of alcohol is another one. If people are increasing in alcohol, and of course, if there's any issues with recreational and illegal drugs, that's also a concern all the time, regardless whether they are depressed. And I can assure you, long-term use of alcohol and recreational drugs leads almost unavoidably to depression, regardless of the person's personality, almost unavoidably, because of the change of the chemistry in the brain. So there are the few things that we have, and I think they're good ones that we can all look at. There's a few other ones that are a bit more complex, and I think we'll leave that for another time, where we might do another little talk where we go into a bit more on the clinical aspects of how a psychologist would look at. But I think for us that are just looking at friends and family, people around us, loved ones and work colleagues, I think it's important that we know exactly what we're looking for, and we simplify. So it could be a combination of all those, or it just could be one of those that's intense. So just keep an eye out on that. Very, very important. With regards to ourselves, just quickly, we need to, I think the best one to start off with is listening to our language. I think we talked about people being negative. If we find that other people are telling us that we're a little bit negative, we sound pessimistic, that we don't like anything, we're always rejecting things, or being contradictory, or finding that our vocabulary has changed, that seems to be a bit negative, that's something for us to work on. Because we also, if we were not feeling depressed, we're also, in a way, trying not to depress others, which is very, very important in life. I think we all have the ability, when we meet someone, to command, if you like, happiness just by the things we say. So don't underestimate the words that we use to others and how we use them. Very, very important. For ourselves as well, we need to look at the time we get up. Have a strict time between Sunday and Thursday night to get up, which we'll look at now when we're looking at coping mechanisms. And obviously moderate any intake of alcohol and drugs, preferably none if possible, but I understand some people enjoy a drink every now and then. If they're adults and they're doing it moderately, that's okay, as long as they're doing it for the right reasons, and we're doing it for the right reasons, because we're enjoying what we're doing, not because it's pressure or because we're trying to fall asleep. If we are, then that means we have a sleep problem, which may be connected to depression. So there are a couple of things for ourselves, which is important: our language and our bed routine. I think those two things are plenty for now, because it's very complex analysing oneself. And if we go too much into it, you'll end up not having any information, because it's important just to start with the basics. Sleep routine, language. What I do, I've got a little trick. It's almost like just about, I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a play, community play. I was fortunate enough to do a bit. And you study your lines, and the curtain opens, you come out, you become someone else. It's a little bit like that. I've tried that before. I've gone to parties, or before this Zoom meeting, I've decided, okay, I've got to be the psychologist now. I've got to talk about this. I've got to regulate my language. And in a way, you might bump into me at a football stadium, and I might be talking very, very differently because it's obvious we adapt to different situations, but we can use that in our favour. That's what actors do. They can convince their brain of certain things. So you might not want to go somewhere, but just try it. Just tell yourself, okay, initially I didn't want to go this, but you know what? I'm going to go there. I'm going to have a fantastic time, and I'm going to be positive. I'm going to be optimistic, and this is the type of language I'm going to use. And you remind yourself, you get into character, and if you do the opposite, if you say, look, I'm not going to enjoy this is terrible, I don't even want to meet that person, I can guarantee you that both are going to come out true. So the power of self-conviction and almost like a little bit of self-hypnosis, meditation that I call it, is important to set ourselves up for what we want. That's the beauty of the brain, we can adapt. So there are 2 or 3 little things for ourselves for now. Yeah. Okay. We've gone through a little bit now, and we're right on track at the moment. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about coping, which is, I think, very, very important, because some of the issues we all face in the everyday life we can't change a lot of these things, right? We can't change them. So coping almost seems like a negative term, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, you got to do what you can type thing, but you can't change it. And so we just got to put up with it type thing, tolerate. But in some cases, it's actually the only thing we have, and it's better than not coping, right? Before we start coping with certain things, we got to ask ourselves, and we ask ourselves literally, out loud, self-positive talk, we call it in psychology, because the brain is a little bit like a computer. Whatever you put in, you're going to get out. So if I double click here on if I want Twitter, and if I use my mouse and double click on Facebook, the computer doesn't know I want Twitter. It's going to open up Facebook. The brain's the same. If we use negative language, the brain doesn't know you want to be happy. It's just going to give you negative results. That's the way it is. So the keyboard to our brain is our speech. It overrides what we think. That's why it's so important to have that self-positive talk. And if any of you have Googled or will Google successful people in the world, what they've done, what they don't do, the 10 top things they do. And so I can tell you, number one, most of the time is the time they wake up, early. So you've got more time to achieve, number one. But within that list, I can guarantee you is self-positive talk, because they know that it's not going to be an easy ride. And that could be just going to the shop buying bread, you know what I mean? Which, by the way, we're all allowed to do now, which is fantastic. But even that, you might encounter someone that doesn't treat you nice, or so forth. Something very domestic can lead to a little bit of anger or anxiety, stress. You know, it starts accumulating. So we can utilize that not only in times of need, but even in the everyday life. When we talk to ourselves, we say, I'm not going to allow that person to affect me. Just by saying that in that tone, it's in a convincing tone. The brain will only pick it up if it's convincing. Because if I'm showing that I'm upset and I say, I'm not going to allow that person to affect me, the brain's not convinced. You've got to become like an actor. You're getting into the right, you know what? I'm not going to allow that person to affect me. And I'm not going to react to this. You're telling your brain, your keyboard is your speech, because your thought is, God, I really want to do something that I shouldn't now. I want to say something. I want to do something that I might regret, or I don't really like that person. All these things, and your brain's going, okay, that's fine. It's not going to talk you out of it. It's just going to process and give you the emotion and the behavior that you want for that. Just like if you're in the jungle and you see, a jaguar running after you, you're not going to start analyzing. You're going to go, wow, this is scary. And your brain's going to go, let's get out of here. And it's going to start getting your legs to move and your breath to go quick. It's part of the animal kingdom. It's part of our survival to react quickly. So the brain is used to that. That's what it does. So if you initiate that, it doesn't know it's a jaguar. It's just a person at the counter being really rude. But the reaction may be the same. We've all watched the news and seen what people have done and go, wow, really? Just because of that, they've done this. Well, the brain is very fragile. It's very easily convinced. All you got to do is talk to people and just see the things that they that they want to do or they believe in. You go, wow, really? And it's so different to ours. But, somewhere along the line, they've convinced themselves, and that's fine. That we're all different. So we all have our own perspective, that's all. But in that moment, if you utilize self-positive talk, you can control that. That's number one. That's the number one thing you can do. So if it's something you can control, then you don't need to cope with it. You finalize it right there. And there's many things in life. We have more control over things than what we think. It took me a very long time to work out that my happiness doesn't depend on whether I pass an exam or whether someone likes me or whether certain things happen. Of course, when we're young, all those things are important, of course. But as we get older, we start with, hang on, I've got more control over my emotions, my happiness than what I thought. It'd be great if we could be taught that a lot younger, But sometimes we just need the experience. So we can pass that knowledge on to our kids, onto the younger generation, so they don't suffer as much, and telling them that, one day this won't mean much. And that's very comforting. So the stuff that we can control, that we don't need inside us, we immediately wipe it out. We have to choose. Ask yourself, do I have control over this? Well, I don't have control of what they're saying, but I do have control of how I'm going to feel about it. Now, all the rest of the stuff, that's what we cope with. So we've already eliminated a lot. And so how do we cope? We cope, number one, is by having a very, very good structure. So if you know someone that has depression, the first thing you got to do is listen, yes? So, and listening means just being silent and acknowledging what they're saying without giving any further advice. If you find it's something serious, definitely, you don't need to diagnose them, but definitely recommend them to see someone. Maybe you need to see someone a bit more prepared than me, or I'd love for you to be able to talk to someone about this that may be able to help you, because it seems like it does affect you, so you give them feedback of what they're saying in a sentence. I understand exactly what you're saying. I can imagine how that would make you feel, and it's fine if you ask for help. It's great that you came to me, and I'll be here any time you need. But I'd also recommend that maybe you need to talk to someone that can guide you, or maybe because there might be things that I might not be able to do, like provide medication or provide long-term therapy and so forth. So that's the number one thing: listening silently, being empathetic, and allowing the person to describe things, and then just in a sentence summarizing what they said in an empathetic way by using the word "I understand," but without giving too many solutions, because I'm sure if they're a smart person, they've already worked out that there are some solutions. A lot of the times we just want to be heard, listened to. So, and once we get to that phase, then it's important that we advise them with some coping mechanism. If they don't want to talk to someone and they just want to have a chat to you, give them this suggestion. You know what you need to do? You need to organize your day, because structure and routine is very important. You start from there, and this is for yourself as well. For those that don't work shift work, between Sunday night and Thursday night, you should be going to bed every day the same. This is what I'll be saying to them. Be going to bed at the same time. Put an alarm on, so then your brain gets triggered to go to bed, just like you have an alarm to get up. Even if you get up anyway without an alarm, have an alarm, because we call it conditioning in psychology. We condition ourselves to do certain things. What that means is that we use something to affect our behavior. Have you ever seen like the cartoons with the boxers? When they hear the bell, bing, bing, they start pulling punches. Well, they've been conditioned to hear a bell and pull punches, because that's what they do all day. There was a famous experiment in the 70s, the rat in a cage that they call, they had a rat, there was a buzzer and electric shock, a mild electric shock. Buzzer, mild electric shock. Buzzer, mild electric shock. Then buzzer, no electric shock. The rat will still jump, because it's been conditioned to jump straight after the buzzer. And we are like that as well. If we have an alarm, we know we're getting up. We know we're tackling the day. If we have an alarm to go to bed or something that advises it's bedtime, our brain switches off. It says, okay, now we're concentrating on sleeping. And we do that with children, don't we? For all of us that have had children, bed routine is very important. There's a certain structure: eat, bath, bed, storytelling, cuddle, and then sleep. And the same again. So the child knows as soon as you start reading, it's time to fall asleep. They know what's coming next, and our brain loves that from very little. That certainty, what's coming next. So you might be stressed, you might be a little bit depressed. You can say to them, but if you know what time you're going to go to bed, you know you have some control over your day. And so that's very important. That's what I'd be suggesting to them. Having that ability to control how long they're going to be awake for and how long they're going to be in bed. They may not necessarily sleep, because that's different. But if you're in bed, then you have a very good chance of sleeping. If the person says, well, actually, when I go to bed is the worst time because I start thinking about negative things and I toss and turn, and that's when I actually start getting a bit anxious because I can't switch off my brain. it seems like they're having a bit of anxiety too. And in that case, if it's detrimental and significant, it's important for that person to be able to go to bed, and if they can't sleep after half an hour, get up for 5 minutes, avoid any caffeine, have a bit of a read of some magazine, and then try again with a little breathing exercise. And this is something you can tell them. This is a very, very simple breathing exercise for anyone that's suffering from depression or anxiety. And you don't need to learn meditation or anything else. It's very, very simple. And it's basically just sitting upright or lying flat on your bed with no pillow, so you're nice and flat. And again, give yourself the order by talking to yourself out loud. I'm going to do the breathing exercise. You tell your brain, this is what we're doing. I'm doing the breathing exercise. You've seen it all with sports people. When tennis players do exactly the same ritual, they bounce the ball 3 times. They might touch their head, or footballers might do a certain thing or point up. And why? Because they're telling their brain, what we want to do is kick that ball in between those posts, like we've done all week. So nothing else matters. And the brain goes, oh, okay, you've got the brain on your side now. You got your brain with you straight away. So you got to see your brain as a different entity. You got to bring it onto your team, because sometimes we've all had those problems of lack of concentration. So these little rituals, this self-positive talk, gives us an opportunity to control that better. It's not bulletproof, of course, but it gives us an opportunity to focus, to tell our brain that we're focusing. And once we do that, I'm going to do the breathing exercise. We lie down. You can put your hands like that on your belly and just breathe in for 4 seconds. So you actually breathe in for 4 seconds, not deeply, but just you control it. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then out 4 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. If you can't whisper it, you can think it. So you go. Four in, 4 out. If the person is very anxious or has panic, they can do 3 seconds. It's a lot harder. You do it for 4 minutes. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 minutes. And you're going to get thoughts in your head. This is the magic of meditation, of mindfulness that we call now, is that it's very difficult to turn off our brain. Unless you studied meditation for a very long time, it's very hard to do. I find the best thing to do is not worry about turning off your brain. Just let the thoughts come in. But there's a trick. You decide to detach from those thoughts emotionally. That's the trick. So when you find people that are very good in stressful situations, they've got the same issues. They're listening to the same things. They're in the same situation as the others, but they remain calm. Why? Not because they've blocked their ears or they've decided to think about something different. They've detached their emotion from their thoughts. So the thoughts there, the events there, the situation is there, but emotionally they've decided to detach. That takes time, but if you start now, but with that breathing exercise, observing your thoughts, it could be, that person at the supermarket, the checkout chick was so rude. That could have been the thought coming in. But you know what? You observe that thought without feeling any anger, any frustration, any anxiety, and by transcending from that thought, from just observing it like you're detached from it, like it's in your brain, but it's not in you, in your spirit, in your soul, in your personality, if you like. It's just a thought there. Just like I could think of now, a jaguar running after me. I could picture that, but I don't have any anxiety because I'm detaching myself from that. Now, if I were a really, really good actor, and that's my scene now, and the director says, let's go action, I've got to make sure I'm attached to that thought because I want to make it very realistic. And when you see a very interesting and realistic, powerful acting scene, that's what they're doing. They convince their brain that the event is happening for that moment. And that can be done. And just like that can be done, you can do the opposite. You can convince your brain that it's not happening. And so you're looking at the thought, you'll see the words, but you're not attached to it. And that's what we practice. You can pass that on. That is the one and most powerful thing that I can transmit to you today, because I know it works. I've been doing this for 27 years. And most people don't do it, to tell the truth, because it's so simple that they don't do it. It's like when people, they need complexity because we're doing psychology, you know. Psychology starts with 5 consonants, P, S, Y, C, H. That's a difficult word, you know. Everything else must be difficult, but it's actually quite simple. It's the most simple things that work in life. But you know what the trick is? Doing it. It's just like you want to put muscle, you want to put biceps. Well, you get a dumbbell, 10 kilo, and you go like that 10 times, and then you wait 30 seconds, you do it 10 more times, you wait 30 seconds, you do it 10 more times. Then the next day you do the same thing. After a week, you put 5 kilos on there, and guess what? In a month, I can guarantee you're going to have bigger biceps. Same with any other muscle. And it's simple, isn't it? But the thing is to do it. That's the thing. With this, it's important that you do it. And if you have someone that you know that suffering from depression, do it with them. And you can do it sitting upright like this. Look. And you know what the trick is also I do in my practice, because it's quite intimidating when someone's got their eyes closed and you're facing them. I face the other way, you know, you can face, look, take your time, face the other way. And you breathe with them and count, and let them count with you. And you see how powerful that is. After 4 minutes, your brain is quite calm. And you do that. I would do that a couple of times a day in the morning, start the day off, 4 minutes investment, go to bed, do the same. And what happens is that you're practicing detaching yourself emotionally from events, from your own thoughts. Eventually, you'll be able to, just like you grow those biceps, you'll be able to have more control, not total, of course, because we're emotional beings, aren't we? And it would be terrible to live like a robot. But it's good to have some control, especially with things that don't really matter, like the checkout chick. Who cares? Next time you go there, she might not be there, you know, or you go to another checkout, or you go to another supermarket, or even she is, doesn't matter. It's by necessity, you know. So, but it can affect us so much. We've all had that, someone that's cut us off at, you know, on the road, or something little that someone said, or so we got a text, and what do you mean by that? Something, and sometimes it's by people that we don't really care about, yet it affects us. And so we need to work on those little ones first, and then work our way up to more complex. And then there's people in our lives that we love terribly, of course, and we do cope with them because we love them, and so we don't want to change them, and we also don't want to become robotic to them. So there's a compromise. But for everyone else, which is 90% of the people which I call tourists, they come into our lives and then you don't see them again. It's important to use those techniques because all that stress adds up. So coping mechanism number 1 is the routine and the structure. Number 2, that self-positive talk. Always keep it going inside your head. We all have that voice, don't we? But check to see what type of language you're using, and ask others to just some advice. You know, how do you think I went yesterday at the dinner party? But it's probably best just to keep an eye out on the language that we're using and see what other people are doing. But also, it's important that we do that little breathing exercise at least twice a day. That's good. It's something that you can pass on to people. It's very, very valuable. And so it's very simple, and its preciousness is tied up with its simplicity. Because something that's not a chore you can do. And if you go to 4 minutes, do 1 minute. 0 to something is huge, I always say. So it doesn't really matter whether it's exercising, whether it's trying to save up money. From $0 to $1 is a lot. You know what I mean, from nothingness to something And same with our own self-development. There are issues, of course, for people that have severe depression, that if they come across as suicidal or self-harm, the best way to ask someone if they're suicidal is pretty much straight up asking them. Don't beat around the bush. Yeah, maybe you can avoid the word suicide, but you can say, as they're talking, and this is a technique that psychologists and psychiatrists use, it's the shock of being asked straight up that does it. It's a bit like word association. You know, we associate something, we kind of like the first thing that comes to mind. So if they know you're going to ask them, they can prepare an answer. The best thing is to say, so what time do you go to bed? Okay. So you're eating well? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on hurting yourself? Yeah, straight up like that. That's the best way in psychology we find. You can say, do you have any thoughts of hurting yourself? Because it's very different. Or have you hurt yourself? That might be a bit intimidating. Or have you ever had any thoughts? Because remember, the thought is tied to the emotion. The emotion is tied to the behavior. In order to actually self-harm, you need to have the thought first. Yep. And so ask them whether they had the thought. And if it's yes, of course, that's when you've got to recommend. If they have already a plan, or obviously if you're in a situation that's desperate, then you just need to ring 000. Don't hesitate. Just ring the ambulance and then it can be dealt with later. That's fine. If you find this, don't try to counsel them out of it. Or if you're in a situation that someone is about to hurt themselves, the first thing you do is ring an ambulance. And then obviously just listen to them and maybe try to delay or you're delaying. For ourselves, if there's people here that do have self-harm thoughts, it's very important that you pick up the phone, make an appointment with your GP and tell them what's happening, and they will refer you to someone appropriate. If it's severe, again, just go to a hospital. Just like if you've burnt yourself or you've broken your leg, psychology and mental health is as important. Just because you can't see it on an X-ray doesn't mean it's not there. So the main thing is to get out of the rut. But for most of the time with depression, we usually have time. So it's important to make sure we focus on those thoughts. Thought is very important. That's why, I mean, a lot of you may have heard cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of psychologists use that. Now, cognition is the old Latin word for thinking, you know. And so it's thinking, behavior. And that pretty much says it all. If someone's behaving depressed, they're probably thinking depressed. So in therapy, we try to change that negative thinking in order to change the behavior. And you can do that on yourself. You'll find that if you change your own thinking, you're going to feel a lot better. It's very, very powerful. It's more powerful than what we think. And like I said, I wish I had known this when I was a lot younger, but it's never too late. And we have more control over things over the external world than what we believe. So you pass on that information to people, which is a little bit of psychological stuff that you can show that you've learned. But I think just being human, being empathetic, being a good listener is a great start with anybody, really. We just don't know what people are going through. We just don't know. Even that checkout chick that has treated us so badly, who knows what she's going through. So it's always best to be conservative with that sense. I always try to remind myself, because it doesn't come natural to me, but I try to remind myself to look in the good in anyone, in everyone that approaches, regardless of how bad they may seem. Start off with that premise and then move on. Sometimes you can't find that in. It's true. There are, people that struggle being good. We know that. But the good thing about that, if they're not part of our life, they don't have to be. So you can only do what you can do at that moment. With regards to our thinking, remember, utilize those little exercises and pass that on to as many people as you can, especially the young people. It's the ones that need it most are the young people. For us, a bit more experience, we come to a stage of our lives that, look, bring it on. I mean, if stuff happens, I'm equipped now. I'm not going to like it, but I'm equipped. But young people don't have the experience yet, and all the knowledge, and it's wonderful when they have someone with that knowledge passing it on. Remember, Plato said, knowledge is power, my friend. Start giving some power out there. Yeah, but I think it's time to round off. So we've identified some symptoms with regards to physical symptoms, with regards to how people behave towards us, towards others, how they're changing what they do, what they don't do, mainly what they don't do, what they've given up, and their language. And we've also looked at some coping with the things we have to cope with, the stuff we don't have to cope with. Get it out of your life as quick as possible, and decide to do so with self-positive talk. With the things we do have to cope with, structure, routine, conditioning ourselves to react. If you need to go to the gym, just put your joggers on. That's condition. As soon as you put your joggers on, that means I'm going to the gym. And so I don't feel like going to the gym. You know what? Don't think about it. Just put your joggers on and go to the gym. And the next time you do it, it's going to be easier. By the time you do it 40 times, you won't even think of it. Between your joggers, you'll be going to the gym. It's done. You know what I mean? And that's the same with most aspects in life. It takes time. It doesn't take long. Human brain adapts very quickly. With regards to severe issues such as suicide and so forth, make sure if you're in one of those situations, just ring the appropriate authorities and for them to take care of it, and delay. That's all you got to do. For the ones that aren't so forth, ask them to do that little meditation exercise and be a good listener. Yeah. All right. Any questions out there? Do we have any questions I don't know if people are connected with their microphone, but we've got a few little minutes, but I don't mind if not, I'll just add a few things. So anything out there?
Hey, Carlos. Sorry I was a bit late. Hey,
where are you? I can't think. Are you? Hi, g'day. How you going?
Not too bad. Here I am.
Oh, there you are.
Friend, how you doing? Here I am.
G'day.
Say hi. Hi. That's my
granddaughter. How you going?
Good. She's good. I've just kind of caught the tail end of your mentioning meditation.
Mm.
And I won't tell you that you know yourself that I've actually been doing a 15-minute mindfulness meditation. I try to do it every single day. I make it a priority in my life, and I can honestly say that I think that's made a huge difference to my anxiety, to my panic attacks, and to the way that I handle my depression. I know it's something I fought for a long time, and I thought, no, meditation's not going to be, it's just meditation. Yeah, 100%, 100%. But in all honesty, there is nothing else aside from seeing my psychologist on a frequent basis and stepping it up when I need to. There's nothing else I've done differently in my life. So I'm honestly going to say that meditation I can actually vouch for. It's taken a good 4, 5, 6 months.
Oh, good. Do you want to give a quick overview about the mindfulness exercise? What do you do?
So I use I access something called the mindfulness app, and it's a very short 15-minute meditation where I simply sit in my chair. It's a guided meditation, and it makes me aware of my breathing first of all.
Good.
So, you close your eyes and you be aware of the breath that's actually flowing in and out of your nose. And then I'm guided to follow the breath down into my stomach and be aware of like the rhythmic flow of breath where your stomach moves in and out. The first thing that I became extraordinarily aware of was that I was breathing very shallowly. So like I was breathing into the top of my chest.
Wow.
So it kind of made me deepen that breath and made me actually breathe down into my stomach so that I had that rhythmic movement, and it's almost like a lulling. And it's simply to make you aware of the thoughts that go through your mind, and to use the breath as an anchor.
Wow.
So that it's I think it's, if I've got a lot of busyness happening in my life or within my mind, I find it extremely difficult to focus on the breathing.
Yes.
But the mindfulness meditation kind of draws me into, that's fine. That's
Excellent.
Perfectly fine. If your mind wanders, that's absolutely perfectly fine, because the process is to actually strengthen your mindfulness. So don't be discouraged or beat yourself up if you find that your mind's wandered and you're now on to some other train of thought. That's okay, because the exercise is actually to train your mind to be able to bring it back. So even if you're wandering, you're not failing. You're simply training your mind to come back to the breath, and you use the breath as an anchor, so that you then go either back to the feeling of the breath flowing in and out through your abdomen, or you focus on it going in and out through your nostrils. So you use that as a tether. And it doesn't matter if your brain goes, if your mind wanders.
That's
you simply use those physical sensations to bring your mind back into alignment. It's awesome. Some days I find it very difficult. Other days
you just keep doing it in routine. It's interesting because I don't use much mindfulness in my own practice and so forth, but I am interested in it because it's been around for really. It's nothing new. It's been around for centuries. In Western and Oriental philosophy. So it's just that with Western medicine, we brought it in because it works. If Western medicine decides to bring something in that's outside the norm, it means that it works, and it's just a matter of getting used to it. I don't use it much, but because I'm more into like the behavioral stuff and I didn't go into exercise and that type of stuff. But I find that I don't have a blueprint for human behavior, and if a patient comes in that is keen to know about that or would react well to that type of therapy, then I would introduce that, because it's definitely going to add, and it's definitely going to allow you to practice detaching yourself from your thoughts and observing your thoughts, which is what mindfulness is, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. I found it's actually given me more of a tighter rein over my own emotions, because I'm a very emotional being, and situations and circumstances, I respond and react emotionally. And I then afterwards think, I wish I didn't react like that. So it's called the mindfulness app.
Yeah, well, that's for people that want to check that out. I know it's quite popular, so it obviously works. So the mindfulness app, and there's a few other things too with regards to sleep. Just looking at, there's a question here that someone quickly asked, how to create a good sleep routine. How to create a good sleep routine? Get a piece of A4 paper and a pencil and write down the time you're going to go to bed and write down the time you're going to get up, because that visual helps. Something very simple. And I use my smartphone for that as well, because you can set more than one alarm. So I've got one alarm that says go to bed, and it goes off at a certain time, and I look at it and my brain goes, I'll go to bed. And whatever I'm doing, I will finalise it then, and go between Sunday and Thursday. Now Friday and Saturday we have a bit more leeway, of course, but so write it down, pick a time, and I say also be a little bit conservative. Don't worry about, I've got to get to bed at 8:30 or no. If you're someone that goes to bed at midnight, start off at 11:45. Start off at 11:45. Set yourself up for success, not for failure. So do 11:45. After a week or two, do 11:30 and start going down. Same with getting up. So that's my suggestion for that. Just condition yourself to go to bed by writing it down and then setting some type of alarm or some type of trigger. And so very, very simple. Another question here, just quickly. Depression because of disability impairment, disability affecting daily activities, especially the last period during lockdown. Yes, without a doubt, lockdown has affected a lot, and we'll probably be doing more of those specifically about that, because the thing with human beings, one of the things we always have until we pass on is our freedom, isn't it? Regardless of where we are. Or who we are. So when that freedom isn't available as we know it, we do get depressed. So it's very important to adapt. The brain is very good at that, but I think it comes back to what we were talking about. Make sure you have a good routine, a good structure, because you're creating certainty in your life, and create certainty that you can achieve, things that you can take on. So you're setting yourself up for success. Because especially if someone has depression with regards to being affected by a disability or permanent impairment, very important that that they have that very good structure, and do things like mindfulness, exercising, start going to groups. There's wonderful community groups. I advise people to get into drama groups and dance groups and so forth. You just never know who you're going to bump into, who you're going to meet, what type of experience you're going to have. Make sure that when we look back at our lives, that we've made the best of it and taken those opportunities. But it's a daily thing, because if you don't remind ourselves, time goes by and we haven't done it. So every day, and I think Donna, isn't it? Yeah, Donna was saying that exercise that she does, people do other type of exercise. It's just a wonderful time to remind ourselves as well during that time that we can call it meditation, you call it mindfulness, you can just call it reflecting, just reposing and thinking about our lives sometimes. It's a wonderful time to do that, which we don't get much time to do. We do get much time, but we don't use it for that. We decide to do other things. So, yeah, thanks very much for that, Donna, for your input. And anyone else want to say anything? There's just quickly journaling. Yes, I'm actually running a journaling course in psychology. Not journalist. I know a few journalists. I don't want to be a journalist. But journaling, which is basically just keeping a diary, but for yourself. And it's wonderful. It's nothing new as well. Some of the oldest diaries we have come from thousands of years ago. One of my favorite books is actually a journal by the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and we call it Meditations. It's a wonderful book now. He didn't write as a book, you write as a journal. But if you get up in the morning and write what you're going to do that day, how you feel, and then at the end of the day, just write again. It doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be brilliant, just for yourself. You get it out of your head, out of your unconscious, onto paper. Very, very powerful. So yes, someone had asked, good way to create a good sleeping routine. Does journaling help? Yes, it does help with depression, and it definitely does help with your bed routine, because you're writing it down at the start of the day. You know what time you're going to get to bed as soon as you wake up, because you've written it in your journal. And you may have a leeway with that. That's fine. You might not necessarily go to bed at 9:30 just because you wrote it down, but your brain loves it because it's created certainty, and you've done it yourself without the need of anyone else or any medication. Just on that word medication, we didn't talk much about depression and medication. That's for another time, but there are some people that do require it, and will go into more the physiological or pharmacological part of depression at another stage. So, all right, I think we're running out of time, and I think the Zoom people are going to be up in arms about this, because they gave us an hour. I don't know, those Zoom people are very powerful apparently, so we better they have been the last 2 years.
Thanks,
Monica.
Carlos. I've got to go.
Yeah, no way. All right, guys. I think that's great for today. Like I said, we're always going to run short, but it's a good start. Take care, guys. All the best.
Thanks, Carlos.
See you,
Are
mate.
you going to be,
Spider.
is this going to be available afterwards so that I can re-listen, because I may have missed some really good stuff?
Yeah, it will be. It's been recorded, so yeah, I'll put it up on the site, but I'll also send it to individual people. If people want to communicate with me, my email is carloscamacho@gmail.com. Carlos Camacho email@gmail.com. CAMACHO. CARLOS You probably see my name on there anyway. Carlos Camacho. Email, so the word email, email @gmail. But also I've got a Facebook page called Carlos Alive. You can look me up. I put all stuff about psychology there, and you can contact me through there. And I also have an Instagram page where I put all psychology stuff up, and it's called Carlos Alive as well, all one word. If you look up Carlos Camacho psychologist, it'll come up anyway. It's not because I'm famous, because there's not many Carlos Camachos.
No. Will you post this on your YouTube channel also?
Yeah. It's going to go on the YouTube channel of the Fairfield Council, but I'll also ask permission to be able to post it on my own YouTube channel, which again, YouTube, Carlos Camacho Psychology, and you'll find it as well. Excellent. I've even got a TikTok if you're interested. I don't dance, but I give psychological. It's as well Carlos Alive. So, but I think the Instagram's wonderful. I love that app in the sense of it's quick. It's you get quick stories, you get quick advice, and you can text me through that too. So it's pretty cool. Carlos Alive.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos.
Guys, go and get them, eh? Remember, if there is anything close to a miracle, is our own existence. So, appreciate every day when we wake up, open our eyes, feel the sun or the rain, doesn't matter what it is, we're here. So it's a good start, all right?
How about simply the breath into your lungs?
Yeah, that's it.
Muchas gracias, my friend.
De nada, gracias, ciao. See, the toucan there's going too. There's a toucan there. He's been there for a while, so... Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Carlos.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you.
Bye.